Welcome to SHORESIDE, the Coastal Resilience podcast and the most resilient podcast in the world. Funded by the Department of Homeland Security, broadcasting out of beautiful Chapel Hill, North Carolina, we speak with the undisputed experts in coastal resiliency. Bruce Rosenblum here with you right now as part of our official launch. We have two very special guests to help us kick this thing off. Our first guest, the legend among urban planners, one of the most forward-thinking researchers in the realm of hazard mitigation. His approach to community development has been applied the world over. And his next-gen planning tool just got put online with a little help from DHS. Introducing Dr. Phil Berke. Doctor, great to have you here.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be on.
Fantastic. And with you, Dr. Berke, is someone who I believe you've described as instrumental to the development of your new system, along with a few other researchers. She tackled the challenges of urban planning in China before earning a PhD stateside and working with Dr. Berke on projects that have gone global. Introducing Dr. Siyu Yu. Doctor, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Bruce. I'm just really happy to be here.
We're happy to have you here. It's a great day. It's going to be a great show. Now, Dr. Berke, I understand you are a New Yorker at heart. What can you tell us about Tappan Zee High School?
Oh, Tappan School. Well, Z means sea in Dutch, the area I grew up in. When you say New York, there's always two New Yorks. There's New York State, New York City, and people usually assign you to New York City, but no. I grew up in the Hudson River Valley, and the Hudson was a critical, it's called Z, and we were the Flying Dutch. And I don't know if the gender neutral term's much better today, but that's what we were. And it was a high school that I grew up on, and I spent many a day on and near and the Hudson River. So that was a big part of my life. And high school was named after the widest point of the river, Tappan Zee. Yeah. There's a bridge over it. Yeah.
Yeah. So you got your start then in Orangeburg, New York. Is that right?
Lovell.
Oh, Lovell. Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Bluefield in Dutch. Yes.
Okay. It's a big Dutch community in that area, huh?
Yeah. Yeah. Originally. Yeah.
Well, I believe then after that you went to Empire State College.
Mm-hmm. Yes, as well. I went to Empire was good for me at the time. It gave a lot of flexibility in terms of the courses I wanted to study, the degree program that I wanted to enter. And it was a long time ago, but it was a wonderful ability for me to take off because I needed to be working. And I did not have the family means to go away or to attend a school that required more than a very small, still a small in-state tuition and supplement my income or supplement my education with part-time motorcycle mechanic. So,
is that right? So you were doing motorcycle work on the side?
Yeah, my part-time motorcycle mechanic and outboard motors too. I worked on those, and that's always around the water, and I like things that moved. Yeah, and machines. Yes,
I tell you, if it moves, it's fun. If it's on the water, it's fun. It's great. Right. Now, do you still ride at all?
No. My wife kicked me out of the house if I did that. No more.
I tell you, these days it's a dangerous proposition these days with all the texting and everything else. It's tough to ride around these days. Yeah.
I did it when I was young. I got it out of my system. I did it for about 10 years, and it was good. And I rode with some people that were great people, and I learned how to work on things and get things done and completed on time. That was critical. If you're going to stay in that business, you got what you say you're going to do, you got to do, and you got to do it in the time you told them you're going to do it within the cost. You're going to do it. So I think that those lessons, being a motorcycle mechanic, Zen and the Motorcycle Repair Book, it was a book that was written back in the 70s. And it just taught you, some say baseball teaches you a lot about life, but working on motorcycles taught me a lot about life. Yeah.
Ooh. It's fascinating how that was a formative experience for you, and it seems like it's helped you out along the way.
Yes, yes, absolutely. It was a great way to get a sense of organization and a sense of focus because I couldn't flop around to the other. I had to be driven to what I was going to do or else it would be a motorcycle mechanic all my life. And most of my friends did that, but I always had an interest in Empire State College, kept me reading. I read a lot, I read a ton, read everything I was on, and took courses that in science and math, and it was wonderful for me. For me, it was a good fit. Yeah.
And you had a dual major. It was economics and also the environmental side, correct?
Yes. I studied. I was interested in how people make a living. That was the practical side of me. And how do you make a living, and how do you sustain yourself on your own, and keep yourself and your family viable? So it was always, I had to have that kind of practical side, but environment to me was critical. Growing up on the Hudson was very, very, very important because the Hudson was very polluted at that time. And it was the same time, I'm a little older, the Cayuga River in Cleveland caught on fire. And the Serpent was so much polluted. And the Hudson River, a lot of the fisheries were destroyed. GE was polluting lots of toxic that are still at the riverbed at the bottom, so they don't want to undo some of the dams and levees upstream, or release all that mud. And so even today, I mean, they stopped it 40 years ago, and I could see raw sewage coming out of sewage pipes when I was, in a boat or walking along. You could actually coming out of the river, so coming into the river. So
right.
Those two things were kind of integral to me: make a living, care about the environment. Yeah,
this is fascinating. And so seeing that almost spurs you to consider continuing along on this academic path and try to fix these problems.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Yes.
Well, yeah. Seeing your hometown polluted like it's a pretty big motivator to, because you want where you live to be nice, and it's amazing. We'll talk more about this later, but you've done a lot to ensure that everybody can live somewhere nice. We'll talk about that in a sec, but I want to bring up something else. You also have, not just a New York connection, you also have a Vermont connection. I want to drop a name here.
Yes.
Let me know what this name means to you. Frederick O. Sargent.
He was set to my life as a graduate student at the University of Vermont. I was very interested, and I went up there 3 years after the Clean Water Act and the Clean Air Act were passed. And the Clean Water Act is, you don't see those floating feces in the surface waters anymore. Or the Clean Air Act. I was in LA in the early 70s. By the by the 80s, it was largely, it was getting much better, and it's much better today. And you don't see floating, sewage in the U.S. anymore in any of the surface waters. And those two acts were critical. And I wanted to say, how do I make that happen? How do we keep? Still a long way to go. And Fred Sargent steered me in a direction where he was an agriculture economist. Actually, he was vertical in the way he looked at the environment. But he had me I took a lot of courses in the sciences, limnology, particularly forest hydrology, around water and soil science, water resource engineering, where you design treatment plants and these types of things. So I got very involved in that. And then Fred Sargent was really very interested in how do you translate that to make communities better off and improve their well-being. And so I've worked in small townships in Vermont, throughout Vermont for 2 years. And then after that, for a couple of years, working with Fred Sargent, who was committed to translating the science so that we could have clean lakes, watersheds that were supportive of the natural environment. And he perfected a lot of techniques. And he's an unsung important person in the planning profession in rural environmental planning, but just made his mark. That affected a lot of young people. Me, one of them. Yep.
It was interesting for me to read a bit about his book, Rural Environment Planning. That's apparently a landmark book in this field. And then hearing what you just said about cleaning up the pollution, this definitely ties into that.
Yes. Actually, it was kind of taking what you know and what you study in school and the high science we generate. Even today, we generate we're doing a lot of modeling. We're doing a lot of mapping, figure out where the risks are and where they're not, where we should put communities, where we shouldn't. We got tons of an overwhelming amount of it. But how much is it really, being translated into actionable planning and policy and so on at the very ground level? And that's not always easy to do. I think in academia sometimes it's underappreciated. Where if we're too applied, too practical, we want to continue to keep doing the research. Well, I think the colleagues I usually surrounded myself with were very good researchers, but also understood that part. And Dr. Yu has been trained that way. So, do credible, high-level, peer-reviewed, publishing, that type of thing we do, grants, but also try to frame it so that, and it's a skill and it's not easy to do, frame it so that it's workable, usable, and understood, comprehended, and trusted by communities. From Virginis, Vermont, little Lake Champlain community, to maybe to larger places, Norfolk, Charlotte, whatever, or bigger. Yeah.
Yes, indeed. I think you hit the nail on the head. Theory is one thing, but practice is another. You've got to put what you know into practice for what you're working on to really mean anything. And it seems like you've really drifted toward people in this space that have stressed the practice part. And I want to throw out another name, somebody who really seems to have emphasized that practice part. Doctor, what can you tell us about David R. Godschalk?
He's God. He used to spell, the beginning of his email was dgod@University of North Carolina.edu. So he was to God, and he was at one of the premier department in the country here. And I had been reading him about his work for quite some time. And after I got my PhD, and I'd been working for a while at Texas A&M, but I got the phone call, would you be interested in a position here? And I got very excited. And once I got to UNC, I learned particularly from Dave Godschalk at the highest level, somebody that can write and get funded consistently, National Science Foundation grant, also speak to communities and be very good at it. And he did it at the highest level, the highest possible. He was career award as a practitioner and a career from the American Planning Association and a career award from the academic side, the Association for Collegiate Schools of Planning. He did both. And it's a rare person that could do that. And so I felt like I always kind of hung on the research side more. But I've always had a deep appreciation for moving to practice and still do it. Want to do it more now, and I am doing more. But so he was an amazing, credible influence on me. Yeah, for the 19 years I was at UNC.
It's a long time, 19 years, and I believe you were teaching there for about that amount of time, right?
Yes, 19, 20 years, something like that. Yeah.
That's a lot of time. And it seems like you started rural with Fred Sargent in Vermont, but then you've transitioned to a bit more of an urban focus, because David Godschalk, he was instrumental to writing Urban Land Use Planning, the book Urban Land Use Planning. That's considered, I believe you said it was the Bible of planning in that department. Now,
I don't call it that, but many people do call it that. The Bible of urban planning, and we're revising the 6th edition right now. So that's could take a couple of years, but it's a major effort. And Dave Godschalk, Ed Kaiser, were instrumental people Stu Chapin, came out of the University of North Carolina. So it was very exciting to be here for that period. And I had an exciting going back to Texas A&M. That was critical for me too. And Texas A&M, unlike University of North Carolina, is a land grant school. So practice and working with communities it's in its gene pool, right? And it's pervasive throughout the university, and it's strongly supported. So there were lots of resources there to do just that, continue with what I was doing. So I had a wonderful 5 years there and worked with 3 doctoral students. One of them's on the podcast here to get her degree under me at A&M. So yeah.
Now there's already a connection here between you and Dr. Siyu Yu. It was actually in 2010 that the book that you helped write, Urban Land Use Planning, that edition, in 2010, it got translated into simplified Chinese. And on that same year, Dr. Yu started at Huazhong University, Science and Technology. That's in Wuhan, China. Now, Dr. Yu, what does Huazhong mean to you?
So that's basically my start, my life, because I kind of be really interested in urban planning, like environmental planning when I was really young. And I actually obtained my kind of undergraduate degree within urban planning, which the book we're talking about, Urban Land Use Planning, has been translated into Chinese. So that's also my textbook. But I actually personally do not know that Dr. Berke is the author, right? Because you translate it, you have their different kind of, But now, after several years of study, I was so grateful that I can work with Dr. Berke as a PhD student, work on environmental planning issues and also coastal resilience issues as well. So that's been kind of my start point about learning more about the planning. Basically, my main goal would like to study urban planning is because I would like to help communities prepare for better futures. So that's basically my main goal entering into the urban planning world. Yeah.
Wow. Dr. Yu, you were reading Urban Land Use Planning. You were reading a book that was co-written by Dr. Berke while you were coming up. Is that right?
Exactly. Like in the Chinese translate version. Yes.
Now, did you ever think that you might actually end up working with Dr. Berke?
I never think in that way. But that's why I was so excited that I can pursue my PhD, because I also get my master's degrees within University of Florida. But after that, I go back and work as an urban planner for several years. And then I come back. I was feel really honored and grateful for the opportunity that I can work with Dr. Berke on the land use planning and environmental planning issues. Yeah.
Definitely some serendipity there. It's amazing the journeys that we take and how they oftentimes intersect. There's a name that I want to throw out, and maybe you know this person. Dr. Yu, what can you tell us about Yanhua Wan?
Yeah, I think that's a great kind of opportunities to connect or the kind of international scholars or domestic scholars work on or kind of land use issues. And then basically for me, I was really interested in flooding ever since like the first year I'm starting my kind of undergraduate kind of a program. And that's why kind of my whole background is like planning and also flooding issues. Focus on different types of flooding issues. Sometimes like a more inland flooding issue because that's the Wuhan issues, right? Oftentimes we say, we're like joking, we're going to take a boat to the graduation because the inland flooding issue, that's for sure.
Right.
You go online and see the pictures. So that's why I'm kind of intriguing, why I really like to study a lot on the land use issues and also inland flooding issue at that time. But after I kind of get more kind of exposure to the like the Florida kind of experience and Texas A&M experience, we are more focused on different type of hazard right now. So that I'm really kind of happy that we can explore so many different directions as well.
Yes, indeed. It seems like the first study that you worked on was with Yanhua Wan, and it involved flooding.
Yes, that's totally like my advisor in China. My first master's degree basically is in planning and also focus on the flooding issue. Yeah.
Sure. So you got your background in landscape design, flooding and all that, but you also spent time in China as a senior urban planner. What can you tell us about the Urban Planning and Design Institute of Shenzhen?
Yeah, I think that's a really great kind of a planning efforts among the kind of mega coastal city in China. Shenzhen is like a fast growing coastal city. And then there are lots of development pressures. But at the same time, we also would like to protect a lot of environments. So how to balance those two kind of a really important elements that relevant to people's life. So that's basically my experience work as a senior urban planner at the Urban Planning Institute in Shenzhen. And then I learned a lot and then practice a lot as a planner and know a lot about how and what planner we want to see from a practice perspective about environmental issues. At that time, I was like fascinated about like how can we balance within the development pressures, but at the same time protection of the environment. As a planner, we fight for that, right? So that's basically my kind of experience, like working as a planner, how we want to do, how we kind of balance, collaborate together.
Mm-hmm. And what compelled you to make the jump overseas? Because you spent time at the University of Florida as well, and then also eventually made it to Texas A&M.
Yeah, I think that was a major kind of a focus on hazards because I'm interested in hazards. And I also would like to study more about hazards into a more deeper way, right? And then thinking about how can I connect my past background and more deeper into environmental issues. And then I find that Dr. Berke, and then I feel really kind of grateful. And I feel like my whole career actually changed in a really positive way from like just a practice oriented to more kind of both, right? Within some practice experience, but be more deep into what we can do as a researchers to help identify the conflicts into planning network, such as our methodology, plan integration for resilience scorecard, and help communities better prepare for coastal hazards. Yeah.
Yes, indeed. We're going to hit PIRS very hard coming up on the next segment. And I'm happy to do that because it's a revolutionary tool. But I want to talk a little bit about when your paths crossed, because you made it to Texas A&M about 30 years after Dr. Berke got his PhD from that same school. And as fate would have it, talking about serendipities, Dr. Berke was there at the time that you landed at Texas A&M. So Dr. Berke, what was happening in your career when you first crossed paths with Dr. Yu?
Well, I started this something called Plan Integration for Resilience Scorecard. It's a tool to help. We can talk about it later, but it's
feel free to talk about it now.
Okay, well, it's a tool basically to help communities better integrate a lot of siloed planning initiatives, and a lot of these siloed planning initiatives, the federal government, from the Department of Housing and Urban Development to the Federal Emergency Management Agency to Department of Transportation, requires local governments to adopt standalone plans. And it's even getting so refined now where there's wildfire plans and floodplain management plans, coastal resilience plans, environmental justice elements and comprehensive plans and hazard elements. So it was a plethora of plans, as my colleague Jamie Masterson would call it. So it was really, I see a lot of just disconnect and individual duplication of efforts, very little integration and leveraging the different sectors of a community as different resources in the way they manage growth and change in a local government. And now that we have climate change and disasters and the growing, it's becoming really important to coordinate land use with infrastructure investment, like where you're going to put streets and water and sewer. They're growth shapers. But that's one public work, but then there's land use planning and the Department of Planning. There could be historic preservation or something else and affordable housing, So all these sectors, and they're not, you could look at local government after local government, they're operating in different sectors. So there's a lot of duplication and not much leveraging each one another's abilities and resources that are coming in, and sometimes in conflict. And I've seen places And the New Jersey coast, for example, after Hurricane Sandy hit New York, the New York, New Jersey area, small local governments that were flattened by Sandy. And so the same geolocation, say a downtown that had been multiple flooding. So FEMA said, Federal Emergency Management Agency, this qualifies as a severe repetitive loss area. So you buy out funding. Another plan, this comprehensive plan or the economic development plan, will say we need redevelopment in this area. We need greater density. We need to build our tax base. We need waterfront revitalization. Same geographic area. Like what? Right? And it's same. You can see two different plans, same with a map of the same area, but proposing two different things, and that repeats itself over and over. So that kind of motivated this thrust towards better integrated planning. And then, so I'd come to Texas A&M with that started here at the University of North Carolina and Little Washington, North Carolina. There's a little network with. And Dr. Yu came by and said, I want to work with you. I'm always leery. I don't know the student. Usually I'm involved in the admissions, and we both got there at the same time. So I wasn't involved in her admission, reviewing her application. So, all right, well, she kept coming. I said, just attend the meetings because I had a couple funded students, and she showed up. She kept showing up. She kept showing up. She wanted to know more. I'd give her readings. So it took her, I don't know how long, CU, but maybe a year or nine. And I said, okay, we'll put you on this project. And that was, I think, one of the best decisions I've made because she has done some amazing work with it. So, yeah.
Wow, yeah. Dr. Yu, you were persistent then.
Yeah, I was really intrigued by the Plan Integration for Resilience scorecard kind of project, and also like its potential to help communities to understand resilience and also vulnerability in a new and different way, an important way. So I feel like I'm really interested in this type of research, and also really interested will work with Dr. Phil Berke as well. So that's why I'm also personality. I'm kind of just like this type of personality as well. Yeah.
So you work well together then.
Yeah, I like to. Yeah.
It's fantastic. And that's very obvious because it seems like PIRS is a collaborative effort. And I don't think it could have been done without everybody on deck. And Dr. Berke, I understand, you got with Dr. Yu, but you were also coaching a few more grad students. This was, like I said, this was a multi-pronged approach. Dr. Yu, I want to drop one of those names for you. What can you tell us about Matt Malecha?
I think he is fantastic. Junior scholar right now. Yeah, and then he is the team member that we start with our small PIRS team, and we work together with Dr. Phil Berke and on the start with the Little Washington, thinking about, how can we identify the different hazard zones? Think about how to spatial evaluate different policy. Like at the really beginning about the PIRS method, how can we better embodying those three different components into the evaluation process of policies? So I think he's fantastic, and he's also worked with different types of communities. Also have experience working with the Dutch community as well, using the PIRS methodologies. Yeah.
And I believe the two of you got married. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe you are correct.
We'll have Dr. Malecha on the show at some point, but I think it's heartwarming that Dr. Berke has worked so hard to help people over the course of his life, and that his work has had these delightful little impacts just like this, in addition to the research that he's done that's actually saved lives. That's, to me, it's phenomenal how these paths cross, and there are second and third order effects. And Dr. Berke, I can't imagine that you could have predicted any of this, right?
No, I was excited after working with CU and Matt for the first 6 months, but I didn't have much to do other than working with them with beyond of course, we would go out and have coffee or beer or something, on occasion, but it blossomed into something really wonderful. So they're both deeply committed to working on the scorecard, and they now have a 2-year-old son, and he's gonna carry it on, right? Siyu?
Yes, I think he's also dreaming about PIRS right now, like what we did before.
Oh Lord, we don't want to do that.
Fantastic. I love that. I absolutely love that. Talking a bit about practicality, going back to that. Dr. Berke, you gave a talk for FEMA about 2 years ago. You said, quote, "We work with, not for communities." That's a very, very strong mantra. Can you tell us more about what that means and how it relates to PIRS?
Well, really to really ground it inside a place where it's valid to the local people, it's trusted, it's understood. If we come in and do the work and then drop it on the community's lap, sometimes I might use it, sometimes like hiring a consultant, but we ask the communities to engage and help collect the data and to work with us, right? Where we'll provide technical assistance. So when we foster and nurture and try to promote this process rather than the kind of the consulting mind frame. And what you get as a result is a understanding and a sense of ownership of what the community has done, and a greater commitment, as well as a greater capacity, because they understand how to make linkages to work on this and to trail what they've learned to action. And so it's not easy to start when you start thinking about integrating and cross cultivating and creating. When you have two separate things, how can they be? You can mention each one or be aware of each one, but how can you combine them so you get something more than this? What is it? The whole is greater than the sum of the parts, or whatever that saying is. I always get it, but you get a fusion that the synergy out of it. So, and you have to do that a while. It's not easy. Yeah, you have to learn, practice it, and figure it out, and try to change the culture in the community for more internal collaboration.
And not just in America. We're talking about communities all over the world. I believe PIRS is actually being practiced in one city in China. Is that correct?
Yes, I think that's our working on with a Chinese scholar at Homeland University, and then we are applying PIRS on more like a transit-oriented development type of also plan integration. How can we better promote the transit-oriented development in Changsha, a capital city of Hunan province? Yeah.
And where else is PIRS being practiced right now?
Globally, we did a lot of like global site as well. We have over 15 cities are under the testing of have been tested by PIRS within the United States, and then some 3 cities within the Netherlands, and then Tokyo, 1 city is in Japan, and also 1 city in China right now. Yeah, but we were trying to explore more. Yeah, yes, in California.
In California, wildfire. New Hampshire, Nashville, Norfolk, Virginia, Texas coast. Yeah.
Right. And it's also been accepted by the American Planning Association as well.
Yes. Yes. Now we also work with tribal communities along the Gulf Coast to work with identifying planning conflicts. How can we better promote social equity within their planning network as well?
It's a big deal, and I want to dial it down for our listeners. It's the Plan Integration for Resilience Scorecard. You can access details on it right now. It's online, planintegration.org. And Dr. Yu, you took that website online. It was, I believe, about 2 weeks ago, right?
Right. Yes. We launched a new website and then an online home for the Plan Integration for Resilience Scorecard. And then we hope that can showcase the whole methodology and also within the research, community engagement, educational piece around the plan integration for resilient scorecard method. And then we really hope we can equip just an environment that can link all the stakeholders together, like practitioners and researchers who are interested in the plan integration for resilient scorecard. And we hope we can build that playing forward to work together.
And this really is, now, Doctor, correct me if I'm wrong, this really is the first time that a tool has been made available to planners that they can use to address gaps in their strategies and also prevent themselves from walking over each other. Is that correct?
Yes. I think there's a lot of cross-referencing that goes on. Like, I'm aware that there's another plan there, and we're going to cross-reference, but there's not this synergy I was talking about where if you get, the purview of a FEMA hazard mitigation plan is to mitigate, right, risk. But say the purview of a comprehensive plan is to guide growth and development in a community. Well, there's lots of very specific things that you could leverage those two together, right, to become more resilient. But oftentimes they don't speak to each other, those plans, or they're two different, very independent, siloed in the same community, even the smaller communities, and is sort of on their own kind of trajectory. And you can see that with other types of planning activities that are going on. They're just not the same. There's not this cross-fertilization where they're each making each other richer. One's making the other richer and vice versa in terms of what it's trying to do to achieve the goals.
That's right. And most people don't understand that a lot of these plans, they have those conflicts, they overlap. Most people have never been inside an emergency operations center, or they've never seen all the different plans and guides. This really decouples a lot of the conflicts, and it helps to, like you said, synthesize everything. And that's very important from an organizational standpoint, because the more organized you are, the better you can respond to situations that are happening, and not just during emergencies. It's for everything, for land use, for land use planning, and just creating a more structured community.
Yeah, environmental protection, because the environment in a community often provides critical life support functions. Wetlands are wonderful, and riparian zones around creeks and rivers, to a certain degree mitigate flooding. Wetlands, but they also help purify water, filtrate, stormwater runoff coming off of impervious pavement. So, and also many other functions, wildlife, biodiversity, these types of things that make communicable. And so the environment gets folded into this. And now that we have climate change, it's just affecting everything. It's kind of like, if it's everything, it's nothing. But no, it's everything and everything. It truly is. Sometimes we problems and get so broadly define them that it's not tangible to work on. But climate is something that's affecting almost everything in our lives. And the risks are, and so is the uncertainty.
What led you to start thinking about the development of PIRS? Was there anything specific that comes to mind that made you say, we need to solve this problem right here, this overlap problem?
I think when I was working actually with Dave Godschalk in the 1990s, the late 1990s, we did the first national study looking at FEMA's hazard mitigation planning efforts, because at that point, the disaster loss were becoming dramatically increasing. And that was the beginning of a greater understanding of the acceleration of the risks caused by climate change. So we early on started to take a look at this, and we found that, as Dave Godschalk would call it, the hazard mitigation plans are kind of like social isolates. He would say sometimes they're orphans. They're out there trying to do the right thing, but what they're proposing oftentimes isn't woven into the fabric of the community across these different sectors of how we manage and plan for change in a community. So but we didn't, we only began to ask that question, and just got very preliminary answers, and it's kind of led from, a whole generation of changes, or a whole generation of different research projects and graduate students, and the last generation, most recent, is Dr. Yu, Dr. Malecha, and Dr. Roy, a third person, Molini Roy. Yeah.
And I believe there's a New Zealand connection here. Can you tell us anything about Neil J. Erickson?
Oh, geez, yeah. Neil Erickson was a mentor of mine in many ways. I got a Fulbright scholarship on research, which is the really nice ones, on Fulbright. And we moved to Hamilton, New Zealand, and I worked for a year with the University of Waikato in the International Climate Change, the Center for International Climate Change. I don't have the full acronym quite. Where they were doing early on really serious climate work, because New Zealand's threatened seriously. And so we got very involved in a lot of the, they call it the RMA planning, the Resource Management Act, and revolutionized and changed a lot of the planning initiatives in New Zealand at the time. And many countries, the United Nations, the World Bank, were paying close attention to what they were doing in New Zealand. It was an innovative approach. So I learned a lot of angles on how you're doing in a really unique format and in a unique way. And they were interested in sustainability. How do we sustain our communities? And so it's very, very critical.
Now, Dr.
Anderson was critical. Yeah.
Oh, no, please go ahead.
Well, Dr. Anderson was a critical mentor of mine. And we wound up getting a grant from the main research funding organization, like the National Science Foundation in New Zealand. And it turned into the never-ending grant. I think it went on for 12 years. So at one point I was commuting to New Zealand, and it was getting too much. But it was a wonderful experience. And my family lived a while, for a year. And it was good. I cherished that year and cherished the decade I worked there.
We're talking about climate change and how it's affecting New Zealand and Australia and places in that area. I believe it's New Zealand that has some of the highest rates, if not the highest rates, for skin cancer in the world. That they're definitely getting exposed.
The ozone layer was thinning dramatically there. Yeah.
Yep. It's a shame.
Sunlight was UV. Yeah. At the time. Yeah.
Hopefully you're able to cover up over there, because I tell you, it's getting everybody.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
But doctors, let me ask you, where does the CRC come into this? Dr. Berke, how did you first get connected to the Coastal Resilience Center?
Oh, okay. Well, that was Rick Ludick for me. Dr. Godschalk introduced me to Rick Ludick, and Rick Ludick is he's one of the leading, if not the leading, coastal storm surge modeler, and he's built a team over 30 years, which we're like a few years into it, and I observe how he's done it. He may not know that. I observe his website closely, and he's built a team, but so he has an ability to not only be an outstanding scientist, but an ability to pull people together. People like me who operate in a very different world, I know he respects and appreciates the kind of work I do. And I've seen them across disciplines do that. So with the Coastal Resilience Center, the Office of Science and Technology, I think at the Homeland Security, has for the last, I lost track, 15 years, 10 years, 12, more than 12 years. Well, a decade and a half, I'll round it off that way. And heavy investment into promoting resilience in extremely hazardous locations like coastal areas. Yeah. And he's been supportive all the way through. And unlike a lot of 3-year, 4-year grants, you really get to work because of the support of DHS and Dr. Ludick. We've been able to just not do the research, because we did a lot of research the first 5 years we did this. We got publications and grants, other sources and so on. but we were able then to have the time to really work on piloting communities. And that's when I came to Texas A&M and met some wonderful colleagues that was supported by the Coastal Resilience Center. And to pilot and work and train students the way I always envisioned, like Dr. Yu, where we do the research, publish, get the street credibility among academics, but also translate it to action in the community. So that's been kind of I always deeply appreciate DHS and the Coastal Resilience Center for that, and steady hand of Dr. Ludick.
Yes, yes, indeed. The very steady hand of Dr. Ludick. Well, we definitely appreciate the work that he continues to put in for all of us. And Dr. Yu, we know your connection to the CRC, but how has working with the CRC really influenced you?
Yeah, I have been really grateful for opportunities that I have been working on this exciting project, the PIRS project, for 8 years, which basically was made possible by CRC and also the support from the DHS. And I really like the way how DHS and CRC promote the next generation students or junior scholars studies on the coastal hazard stuff. I really am grateful for the support over the 80 years. And then to be continued too.
Yes, indeed. And Doctor, you have such a unique perspective on all of this, having worked in the East and also the West. What are some similarities and differences here when it comes to planning for resiliency, or is it all the same?
I think this is a really great question. Thank you, Bruce. I think plan integration is like a global issue. But we target on a really different way. Different countries have their own kind of way, such as within the United States, we're more focused on local planning. Local land use planning is the most powerful, most powerful tool for better prepare for the future. Whereas in some other countries, such as the Netherlands, Japan, or China, there are different tiers of planning. So they have a national level, provincial level, or local level. And then the plan integration issues, they are quite different. We are more focused on planning networks within our region, within our local. How can we better integrate different efforts from different organizations? Well, in such as the Japanese or like a Dutch case or Chinese case, we're thinking about a different tiers collaboration. What are the different focus? What are conflicts between, say, national plan or local plan? And how can we prioritize that for more like a resilience issue? So I would say the CRC, these opportunities bring us to really deep dive into the network analysis, and also how can we help better connect, work with community, engage with the vulnerable population within the. That's a wonderful opportunities that build up the foundation of the whole plan integration issue and also the resilience issue.
That's a comprehensive answer, and I appreciate all those details. We can unpack that for the next half hour, I tell you. But let me just ask you, and Dr. Berke, feel free to chime in on this one too. What would you say is the biggest barrier to resiliency and recovery in different areas like the ones you just talked about?
Yeah,
I think short-term thinking. Oh, no.
Go ahead, Dr. Berke, go ahead.
Okay. I'll try to. I think short-term thinking. I think when we restore a beach or put up an embankment in front of a dangerous location that's prone to the coast, particularly, we think we get a false sense of security. It's an economic investment opportunity because that's I see for tourism and residential development. I'm working in a mountain community right now that's growing very rapidly in Western North Carolina. And it's like along a major river that has flash flooding, very mountainous, and they want to put high density urban development. It's called new urbanism, mixed uses, transit line, transit stops, the whole deal. And it's right in a floodplain that's going to be more increasingly exposed to sea level rise. And why? Why are we doing this? Well, if you're a developer, it's private property. I want to make as much as I can, or I see this property and you put up a 8-foot or 10-foot embankment. So now it's safe. And now I'm going to buy up the land and Again, I'm going to make a profit. And then the community saying, oh, my tax base is going to get expanded. But, FEMA is $20 billion in the hole, the National Flood Insurance Program, because they can't keep up. And we pay $600 million a year, from what I understand, in interest rates off that because it's borrowed money. So, and we just, the rate of increase of loss far outpaces the population growth or the economic growth of the country. And it's because we're building in dangerous locations. And part of it has to do with climate and hazards, but another part of it is just we're not looking ahead. We're not planning for this in the way we should be. And it's very frustrating. So we try to make our little, right, Dr. Yu, little steps. We try to nudge communities in that direction.
Yeah, I feel the same way. Like I was trained by Dr. Berke, and oftentimes our discussion or meeting focus on this type of issue, right? Talk about like communities across the United States are basically increasingly vulnerable to nature hazards as we continue to develop in the hazard area. And then especially the community and also, like we say, planning staff, they are oftentimes like struggled by many different kind of requirements, including like saying preparing for and mitigating hazards. And unfortunately, like we just mentioned, the development pressures, oftentimes they win out and then really leading to unsafe development in the high hazard area. So oftentimes we say the local land use decision really critical, which are really critical part of the equation. Both are costs or are potential solutions that because they are decisions that affect the community directly. So how can we better prepare for that? How can we better integrate different efforts within different departments, different collaborations of planning steps or different kind of way? That's what we are looking for. That's what we're hoping for, using the plan integration for resilience scorecard to identify the conflicts and better prepare for better integrated resilience efforts.
It's certainly critical. There are millions of people that live on the coast by choice, by necessity. It's a lot of people and a lot of problems that come with coastal living. And both of you are at the forefront of trying to solve those problems. And I tell you, I've got no doubt that we could stretch this for another hour. We'll have to do a part 2 because we're coming up on time here. It has been such a pleasure to cover these topics with you. But I want to give you the last word. Is there anything that you want to tell the audience at all about yourself, about PIRS, about coastal resiliency, the CRC, anything at all?
Well, I'd like to tell the world, I'll even stick to the United States. I'll even go to North Carolina. We need to be better looking. We need to be preparing to adapt for the changes that are coming. And I think there's a lot of people maybe that just prioritize the short-term gains that we get or want to deny. And I fear for that. And I fear for the next generation. It's just not the coastlines. It's drought, it's wildfire, large migrations globally, which will affect borders, conflict. I mean, all this thing fluctuates. But if we can at least get our own, houses in order, we can learn to do that. We can be in a better position to be able to take on an ethic of applying our abilities globally. So, and I think PIRS is one. It's not. Some of us might think it's the whole world, right? But it's one tool to help communities move in the direction, of resilience.
I feel like, to me, my research goals, I aim to increase multi-hazard resilience and the social equity in the area of climate change. So that's an exciting, new directions for PIRS. We are doing flooding, we're doing urban heat, and we are also doing for the wildfire. So how can we also enhance the multi-type of hazards resilience among all the vulnerable population on different types of communities? So that would be our a new direction for our PIRS research, and also work with community as well.
Powerful words. We've got the doom and the gloom, but we also got the hope element there.
Yes, absolutely.
And I think a lot of that hope comes from folks like Dr. Berke and Dr. Yu, who are working tirelessly to make sure that our people are protected, not just in the United States, but around the world. Doctors, Been a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on the show. We really appreciate you and your expertise. Shoreside, it's a production of the Coastal Resilience Center made possible by the Department of Homeland Security. Make sure you tune in next month for the Skinny on Hurricane season. You don't want to miss that. Lots of great stuff on deck for you. But until then, check out our website, coastalresilienccenter.org. Also, planintegration.com. That's the PIRS site. All the data that you need on PIRS is on that site. Check it out. Also, look at all of our Twitter and social feeds through Linktree/Coastal Resilience Center for all of our socials. Thank you so much for tuning in. We are so very thrilled to be seeing you shoreside. Bruce Rosenblum signing out from Shoreside. We'll see you real soon.